Hello Year 7. Today we're going to look at who was to blame for the death of Becket. Your learning outcomes are to know the main events leading up to Becket's murder, to have ideas about who was to blame and why, and to understand the importance of religion. So if you could please write the title down. You can put the video on pause to do that. Okay, so we're going to get started. So first, what I would like everyone to do is write down those words on the left. So you have treason, chancellor, pope, bishops, and archbishop, and you're going to try and match them with those descriptions on the right. So let's do the first one together. So treason is going against the king or queen. So now what I would like you to do is write down the rest of those words on the left and then try and match them with the descriptions on the right. And again, if you can put the video on pause and then we'll go through the answers when you've had a try. Okay, so let's have a look at the rest of these questions and answers. So Chancellor. So this one is an important advisor to the king. So a Chancellor is a really important advisor to the king during the Middle Ages. The Pope is the leader of the church. So this is really important, Year 7. You have to remember that the Pope is the leader of the church. He's one of the most important people in medieval Europe. Bishops work for the church. And finally, the Archbishop controls the church for the Pope in England. So if you remember our feudal system, where you have the king, the nobles, the knights, the peasants, the church system is going to look like the Pope, the archbishops, the bishops, and then the priests. So the archbishops are the ones who look after the church for the Pope, because the Pope can't be everywhere at once. He lives in Rome and he oversees Rome. So just make sure you've got all these correct, and then we're going to introduce some of the characters we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so let's introduce our two characters in this event. So there's King Henry II and Thomas Becket, and we're going to have a look at both of these men. So Henry II was the King of England. Henry was a strong king. He conquered Ireland in 1172, making the English kingdom larger and richer. He was close friends with Thomas Becket and appointed him Archbishop of Canterbury, believing that Becket would help him with his aims. Henry believed there could only be one ruler of England, and it was him, not the Pope or the Church. So Henry believed that he should control England, the Pope shouldn't tell him what to do. So Henry is a really important king of England because he invented something which we still use today. So a part of the justice system is having a jury. So this was an idea that Henry thought of. He thought that we should have a jury to be able to work in a legal system. So he's a very important man and he's a very strong king. So the other person we're looking at here is Thomas Becket, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. So the Archbishop of Canterbury is a very important role. So Becket became a successful and trusted friend and advisor to Henry. He became Archbishop of Canterbury in 1162 and took his role very seriously. He was a religious man who believed in Christianity and would defend his religion against anyone and everyone. So if we're thinking about this Year 7, he really wants to defend his religion. So just think about whether he's going to let Henry do what he wants. Have a think about that when you're looking at the story, So we're going to read through this story, and then we're going to complete a storyboard to help us remember those key events for the next lesson. So I'll read through it. Thomas Becket's life and death were remarkable. The son of a wealthy commoner, he rose to become Chancellor, a post given to him by Henry. Such was his trust in Becket. In 1162, he was appointed the Archbishop of Canterbury by Henry. He became a strong defender of the church and the rights of clergymen. This was contrary to the loyalty Henry had expected from Becket. At the time, the church held great power and wealth over monarchs and their people. With the support of the Pope in Rome, Becket represented an even greater power. So that even greater power, year 7, that's God. Becket also enjoyed the support of the people. Every village and town had priests and churches that were the centre of all life. Health, holidays, learning, and the gateway to heaven revolved around devotion to the faith. The church, as guardians of all this, held great power and influence over the people. Becket refused to sign the Constitutions of Clarendon, which would limit the power of the church in England. So this is really important, year 7. The Constitutions of Clarendon would have given Henry II a lot of power, and it would have limited the power of the church. At a great council held at Northampton in 1164, Becket was found guilty of treason. Becket fled to France. In 1170, the Pope threatened to remove Henry from the church, so Henry let Becket return to England. Becket had won. Then Becket removed 3 bishops who supported Henry from the church. In rage, Henry is said to have shouted, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" 4 knights heard this, and in a misplaced effort to please Henry, rode to Canterbury and murdered Becket at the altar of the Cathedral on the 29th of December 1170. So that's the story, year 7. Your job now is to complete a storyboard of 6 boxes telling the key events of that story. Make your pictures as detailed as possible, because I would like you to bring these in for our next class. So that will be the first one where we're back in school, so we can have a look at some of the fantastic drawings that you're doing. So again, if you want to put this video on pause, you can get on with that. Take as long as you like. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to do some fantastic drawings there in those 6 boxes, and you've made a really good in-depth storyboard. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to ask the question, who was to blame? So from this story, your storyboard, and what you know about Henry and Becket, can you decide who you think was to blame? So try to write a P paragraph explaining why. So obviously we know P is your point, evidence, explain. So a good starter would be, I think blank is to blame because, and then you can go into your evidence to support that, and you can explain your evidence. So I've had some really interesting responses to this. I've had people say it was Henry's fault, it was Becket's fault, someone said it was the Pope's fault, which is really interesting. I had another student say it was the 4 knights' fault for misinterpreting what Henry meant. So this is completely up to you, and we're just trying to get your opinion on the subject. When you've done that, you can try and create a spider diagram explaining the reasons why Becket was murdered. So think of as many reasons as you can, because that's going to come very handy when you come back to school. So again, if you want to put the video on pause and complete those tasks, and then we'll move on to our final thing. Okay, so our plenary, I've got a quote here. Thomas Becket was a troublemaker who simply wanted to cause problems for Henry now he had the position to do so. He didn't respect the title of king. What do you think of this opinion, year 7? Can you try and write a few sentences on whether you agree with it or not, and why? So you're just going to write some sentences on what you think about this quote. So when you've completed that year 7, that is going to be the end of the class. So I hope you've enjoyed something and learned something about this. Obviously, next class we do on Thomas Becket. We will be back in the classroom, so that's something to look forward to. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you soon.